Hey everybody, this one is called Do It Yourself Kangaroo Court number 10. Walk out. My other recording that I did, it wasn't, there was a lot of complaints about the sound, and so I'm trying to redo it. The problem was the microphone, I was too close to it, so I would move past it from time to time when I was talking, and so then it would have trouble picking up the voice. Anyway, so I'm redoing it this time, and I'm even using different software because that software is not that reliable. But let's get going. Kangaroo courts are everywhere. A kangaroo court is a term descriptive of a sham legal proceeding in which a person's rights are totally disregarded and in which the result is a foregone conclusion because of the bias of the court or other tribunal. And that's taken from Black's Law Dictionary, 6th edition. And what they have is clerks masquerading as judges. When acting to enforce a statute and its subsequent amendments to the present date, the judge of a municipal court, and that's any court, is acting as an administrative officer, not in a judicial capacity. Courts administrating or enforcing statutes do not act judicially. All courts, but merely ministerially, but merely act as an extension, as an agent for the involved agency, but only in a ministerial and not a discretionary capacity. They're bought and paid for clerks. It is the accepted role not only in the state courts, but of the federal courts as well, that when a judge is enforcing administrative law, they are described as mere extensions of the administrative agency for superior reviewing purposes, as a bought and paid for ministerial clerk for the agency. Judges who become involved in enforcement of mere statutes, civil or criminal in nature, and otherwise act as mere clerks of the involved agency. Oaths. All oaths must be lawful, allowed by common law or some statute. If they are administered by persons in a private capacity or not duly authorized, they are quorum non judice and void, and those administering them are guilty of high contempt. And this is a cite from Tomlin's Law Dictionary, 1835 edition, volume 2, but they are citing book 3 and book 4 of the Institutes of the Laws of England by Coke, which goes back to the 1500s. And so the point I want to make here is that any government official can be operating in his official capacity or in his private capacity. If he goes outside the scope of his responsibility or does something illegal or unlawful, he is no longer in his official capacity. This is as old as time itself. All government employees, judges, police officers, etc., can be in their private capacity or their public capacity. An officer who acts in violation of the Constitution ceases to represent the government. That's the federal courts, Brookfield Construction Company versus Stewart. If they do anything that is illegal or unconstitutional, they cease to represent the government and immediately move from their public capacity to their private capacity. And it's your responsibility. You go into that kangaroo court, you better know what's going on. A clerk masquerading as a judge is not competent to do anything judicial, like issue orders or warrants. A clerk masquerading as a judge is operating in his private capacity and has no immunity. And this is Burns versus Superior Court, a California case. Ministerial officers are incompetent to receive grants of judicial power from the legislature, and their acts in attempting to exercise such powers are necessarily nullities. That's why it's called a void judgment. Brutum fulmen. An empty noise, an empty threat, a judgment void upon his face, which is in legal effect no judgment at all, by which no rights are divested and from which none can be obtained, and neither binds nor bars anyone. And that's Black's Law Dictionary, 4th edition. And what they've done now is these bail priests, these bar member Satanists in the legislatures have given them good faith clauses that allows them to go ahead and assault you and make it so there's nothing you can do to them when they do it, as long as they're operating in good faith. Copies of these documents can be found in my private group at Yahoo called Administrating Your Public Servants. For a complete set of YouTube videos with private information shares, a DVD with over 50 searchable law dictionaries, and other books and forms, contact me privately at engineerwin@yahoo. You can also get them on a thumb drive. And this last paragraph is for all the Satanist order follower revenue officers operating in their private capacity under the Federal Tax Lien Act of 1966. Donations to support this work are appreciated, but I prefer gold or silver coin. But as an extremely less desirable alternative, I can accept the IOUs, the Federal Reserve notes, the PayPal gifts, the checks, the money orders, etc. Send me an email for particulars. Under international law of warfare, all parties to a cause must appear by nom de guerre because an alien enemy cannot maintain an action during the war in his own name. That's why they spell your name in all block capital letters. A mixed war is one which is made by one side by public authority and by the other by mere private persons. That's Black's Law Dictionary, 5th edition. If they spell your name in all block capital letters, they are operating in their private capacity. Civil law, Roman civil law are convertible phrases meaning the same system of jurisprudence, that rule of action which every particular nation, commonwealth, or city has established peculiarly for itself, more properly called municipal law, to distinguish it from the law of nature and from international law. And that's Black's Law Dictionary, 4th edition. So when they're assaulting you with their statutes, that's municipal law. That's law for government employees is what it's for. If they're attacking you with a statute, then they're operating in their private capacity. The Roman cult equals warfare. See the martial laws coming from the United Nations video. See the international laws, a subset of canon law video. See the Roman cult slave scam video. See the slavery equals Roman cult video. See the all warfare is commerce and all commerce is warfare video. They have to fabricate evidence of their slave. Every taxpayer is assessed to K trust, having sufficient interest in preventing abuse of the trust to be recognized in the field of this court's prerogative jurisdiction. And that's a summary from Inri Boland's 1912, 135 Northwest 164. And a summary of the congressional record, 5 pages of the congressional record dated June 13, 1967, says, a citizen of the United States is a civilly dead entity operating as a co-trustee and co-beneficiary of the public charitable trust, the constructive Sesticate Trust of U.S. Inc. under the 14th Amendment, which upholds the debt of the USA and U.S. Inc. And this is all coming from the Roman cult, folks. A Sesticate use, a Sesticate trust equals the Roman cult. Yet still it was found difficult to set bounds to ecclesiastical ingenuity. That's the Roman cult, folks. For when they were driven out of all their former holds, they devised a new method of conveyance by which the lands were granted not to themselves directly, but to nominal fiefs, to the use of the religious houses. That's the Roman cult, folks. Thus distinguishing between the possession and the use and receiving the actual profits while the season of the land remained in the nominal fief, who was held by the courts of equity, then under the direction of the clergy. That's the Roman cult, folks, and that's still to this day, folks. To be bound in conscience to the account to assist to use for the rents and emoluments of the estate. That's taxes, folks. And it is to these inventions that our practitioners are indebted for the introduction of uses and trusts, the foundation of modern conveyancing. This citation is taken from Tomlin's Law Dictionary, 1835 edition, volume 2, under the definition of mort main. And if it was the foundation of modern conveyancing back then, it's still the foundation of modern conveyancing. Slater's protestations to the effect that he derives no benefit from the United States government have no bearing on his legal obligation to pay income tax. Unless the defendant can establish that he is not a citizen of the United States, the IRS possesses authority to attempt to determine his federal tax liability. That's United States of America versus William N. Slater, 1982. This is the D.C. Code, which is located at 31 Stat 1432, the legal estate to be the necessitacea jus. That was done in 1901. Again, the D.C. Code, for which was approved March 3rd, 1901 by the 56th Congress, Section 2, located at 31 Stat 1189. This is right up in the very front. And be it further enacted that in interpretation and construction of said code, the following rules shall be observed, namely, the word person shall be held to apply to partnerships and corporations. More of the D.C. Code. This is located at 31 Stat 1230, Section 252, presumption of death. This is what gives them the right to presume that you're dead, that you're a cesticate trust. And this is where it's codified. Statutes equals contract equals Roman cult. Did you give up your God-given rights for some satanic privileges? Title 15, United States Code, Section 44, definitions. Corporation shall be deemed to include any company, trust, so-called Massachusetts trust or association, incorporated or unincorporated, which is organized to carry on business for its own profit or that of its members, and has shares of capital or capital stock or certificates of interest. And it has the same definition, except it doesn't have shares of capital or capital stock or certificates of interest. Don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel. Don't forget to follow me on vid.me. My link to my vid.me channel is right there. Don't forget to follow me on Steemit at Steemit Sovereignty International. Don't forget to like this video. On YouTube, don't forget to click the bell next to the subscribe button so you're notified when there's a new upload. On vid.me, don't forget to upvote this video. On Steemit, don't forget to vote and make your comments. There's the front page of my channel, and notice the arrow is pointing at the bell. You click on the bell, a pop-up will come up, and you have to check a box and click OK to be notified. There's Steemit. The left arrow is where you upvote the video. Now, the middle arrow is the number of upvotes, and the right arrow is where you can make comments. And this is, again, Steemit. This is a crypto wallet. And if you click on the, you see the little hand next to the arrow, the hand is clicking on the crypto wallet profile. This little pop-up comes up where you can follow or unfollow someone. Hopefully me. Statutes equals contract equals Roman cult. Did you give up your God-given rights for some satanic privileges? But individuals, when acting as representatives of a collective group, cannot be said to be exercising their personal rights and duties, nor be entitled to their purely personal privileges. Rather, they assume the rights, duties, and privileges of the artificial entity or association of which they are agents or officers, and they are bound by its obligations. And that's U.S. Supreme Court, Braswell versus United States in 1988, quoting U.S. versus White in 1944. So this is nothing new. Uniform Commercial Code equals Unidroit equals Roman cult. Did you give up your God-given rights for some satanic privileges? Whenever this title, which is the Uniform Commercial Code, creates a presumption with respect to a fact or provides that a fact is presumed, the trier of fact must find the existence of the fact unless and until evidence is introduced that supports a finding of its non-existence. And that's UCC 1-206, presumptions. Uniform Commercial Code equals Unidroit equals Roman cult. And this is UCC 3.308, proof of signatures and status as holder in due course. In an action with respect to an instrument, the authenticity of and authority to make each signature on the instrument are admitted unless specifically denied in the pleadings. If the validity of a signature is denied in the pleadings, the burden of establishing validity is on the person claiming validity, but the signature is presumed to be authentic and authorized. So these bail priests forge your signature onto a contract and then sell you into slavery. That's exactly what they're doing. This is UCC 8.114, Evidentiary Rules Concerning Certificated Securities. The following rules apply in an action on a certificated security against the issuer. Unless specifically denied in the pleadings, each signature on a security certificate or in a necessary endorsement is admitted. If the effectiveness of a signature is put in issue, the burden of establishing effectiveness is on the party claiming under the signature, but the signature is presumed to be genuine or authorized. And so they're forging your signature onto a contract, they're securitizing it and selling it on Wall Street. And there's been all sorts of people that have found their criminal cases at Fidelity Investments worth millions of dollars. The Uniform Commercial Code equals Unidroit equals Roman cult. It's all about slavery. If they're assaulting you with the Uniform Commercial Code, they're operating in their private capacity, folks. Announcing a subscription-based YouTube channel called Sovereignty International. The recommended cost of the subscription is currently US $1.99 because it avoids the advertising only. If you like my work, it can be a donation. Certainly it's a small donation, but a whole bunch of people chipping in a little bit adds up to be a lot. And everything is appreciated. The only power that these New World Order Satanists have over us is through fraud and deception, and my agenda is to expose it for all our benefit, but I can't fight all the battles. And that's why I'm publishing this information, because I need other people fighting their battles too. I'm currently publishing one video a week. Some people had some trouble finding the channel, so I'll link to the channels at the bottom of this slide. Some exclusive content that I'm going to be publishing or have published. Actually, this is already up there. This is an Arlington Private Information Shares up there. Land deed training is up there. Estoppel certificates training. Foreclosure estoppel certificates training. Corporate denial training. Toll roads notice and demand training. Invoice training. Notice of void judgment training. Revocation of signatures training. And third-party witness training. I've also got federal habeas corpus training, revocation of voter registration training, and criminal complaint training. I've actually got two of them up there. I've got one against Walker County Sheriffs, and I've got one against Coinbase, and I've got more that I'm going to be doing. I'm also going to have lawsuit training and other training based on requests that people give me. Everything that you need is to free yourself is available for free on my free YouTube channel, Sovereign Living. But if you want to support the cause for a modest $2 a month, $1.99, it's certainly appreciated. All forms, files, and other instructions are available for free on my two private groups at Yahoo Groups and Google Groups. Although the exclusive training, there is some exclusive stuff on this exclusive channel. This is the front page of my channel, and if you notice, the top arrow is pointing at the URL because some people had trouble finding it, so now you shouldn't have any trouble. And the bottom arrow is pointing at the Start Free Trial button because some people actually sent me a $1.99 donation. I actually sent them an email back and offered to refund it if they wanted me to subscribe to the channel because I have absolutely no control over the subscribers. If you want to subscribe to the channel, then you have to jump through the hoops for YouTube and start the free trial button. The YouTube is probably going to want some payment arrangements and who knows what else. I have absolutely no control over the subscribers. I can't even see all the subscribers. Anyways, back to the topic at hand. Statutes equals contract equals Roman cult. Did you give up your God-given rights for some satanic privileges? These Roman cult Satanist bar member whores masquerading as judges forge your signature onto a contract and then presume it's authorized and authentic. And who's going to call a judge a liar? That's how they're populating the prisons. Carl Lentz brought up the issue of forgery against CPS when they stole his son. After 11 years, he got his son back in his successful one-page lawsuit. See the Judicial Horrors video. Roman cult equals slavery. He, the prisoner, has, as a consequence of his crime, not only forfeited his liberty, but all his personal rights except which the law and its humanity affords him. He is, for the time being, a slave of the state. And that's an 1871 Virginia court case. And under the Bible, that's one of the first orders of business these Satanists have to do, is get rid of common law, because at common law, they'd be put at death for doing this. If a man, this is Deuteronomy 24:7, if a man be found stealing any of his brethren of the children of Israel, and maketh merchandise of him, or selleth him, then that thief shall die, and thou shalt put evil away from among you. And we're going to be held accountable for allowing this to happen. As a matter of fact, I think we are being held accountable. Judgment Day is coming. And this is the so-called 13th Amendment. And in Section 1, it says, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted. So they sell you into slavery. That's exactly what these Satanists do. And they had to facilitate the disappearance of the real Article 13th Amendment to create this. Again, it goes back to the martial law. That's the only way they could have made this happen. And it's all coming from the Roman cult, and I'm going to show you how it is. International law is a subset of canon law. International law started with the Roman cult. Unidroit stands for the International Institute for the Unification of Private Law. Unidroit is located about 100 yards from the Holy See. Unidroit controls and governs the Uniform Commercial Code. Through Unidroit, the Roman cult has seized control of all courts. The Roman cult's bar members are already officers of all courts. See bar members 1, 2, and 3 videos. See the international law video. See the Roman cult slave scam videos 1 and 2. See the Unidroit video. See Satanists are cowards video. See the United States is owned by the Roman cult video. Unidroit stands for Unification of Private Law, and the website says that 63 countries have adopted it, and it's designed to be automatically implemented. In other words, when Unidroit makes a change to the Uniform Commercial Code, the changes automatically filter down into all 63 countries. Canada and the United States have been signatories to the Unidroit Treaty for over 30 years. Unidroit website says nothing about Texas or Arizona or any of the American states or the Canadian provinces. Therefore, Unidroit application in the American states and the Canadian provinces is only in federal areas. That's why they have to fabricate evidence of their slave. Unidroit covers negotiable instruments, civil procedures, secured transactions, legal status of women, maintenance obligations, contracts, banking law, much more. See the website. We're going to see it right now. This is one of the pages in the Unidroit website. Let's get in a little closer. It's talking about commercial contracts, cultural property, franchising. And here's another page. Let's get in a little closer. You see the header up at the top of the page, the Unidroit header. And this was printed in 2014, so it's been a couple years, but it hasn't changed. Leasing, security interest, transport, banking law, capital markets. Why do you think they want Federal Reserve notes as payment for everything? It's all a Roman cult. Civil liability, civil procedure. Unidroit controls all of the rules in these so-called courts. Contracts in general, cultural property, franchising, hotel keepers, insurance, intellectual property, leasing, legal status of women, maintenance obligations, movement of persons, negotiable instruments. That's the banksters. International Treaty for the Unification of Private Law. 1955 Benelux Treaty on compulsory insurance against civil liability in respect of motor vehicles. The 1958 Convention concerning the recognition and enforcement of decisions relating to maintenance obligations towards children. 1959 European Convention on compulsory insurance against civil liability in respect of motor vehicles. These are all treaties that are incorporated into Unidroit. And here's the membership. And this is not all of it. This is only a small part of it, the ones that I wanted to emphasize in this presentation. And it shows I got the one starred as Australia, Canada. There's a bunch of South American countries, China. There's European countries, the Russian Federation, United Kingdom, United States, and some more South America. African countries are there too. All judges are actually clerks masquerading as judges. They're bail priests. Their black robe is their bail priest uniform. They routinely deny anything related to justice from happening because it's so good for business. They encourage their false flag operations and agent provocateurs because it's so good for business. They encourage the police state murders, assaults, kidnappings, and thefts because it's so good for business. Everything they do is a fraud and a lie because they're Satanists. My contact information is sovereigntyinternational.wordpress.com. My website is sovereigntyinternational.fyi. My email address is engineerwin@yahoo. My YouTube profile is Sovereign Living and Sovereignty International. I've got two of them. My Facebook community page, I deleted it due to censorship on the part of Facebook. My private group on Facebook called Sovereignty International is being deleted. It takes time to ban 17,000 people off your group, and I'm not going to let Facebook profit from my hard work. My Yahoo private group is called Administrating Your Public Servants. My Google private group is called Administrating Your Public Servants. Follow me on Twitter at EngineerWin. Follow me on vid.me at Sovereignty International. Follow me on Steemit at Sovereignty International. There are no common law offenses against the United States, only those acts which Congress has forbidden with penalties for disobedience of its crimes. So, no common law crimes, which means that that's all evidence that's under martial law. There's statutes only, which means it's always a clerk masquerading as a judge. Under Texas law, no act or omission is a crime unless made so by statute, and these court cases are talking about it. The legislature may create an offense in the same enactment, provide exceptions to its applications. There's no common law crimes in Texas, which means it's statutes only, which means it's always a clerk masquerading as a judge. Everything is an admiralty. A writ of error doth not lie upon a sentence in admiralty, but an appeal. And this is Tomlin's Law Dictionary, 1835 again, but again they're citing Book 4 of Coke's Institutes on the Laws of England, which goes back to the 1500s. Why do you think they call it a court of appeals? It's because it's admiralty. It's the same thing that precipitated the War of Independence. It's exactly the same thing. And this is taken from the Causes and Necessities for Taking Up Arms, 1775. Statutes have been passed extending the courts of admiralty and vice-admiralty far beyond their ancient limits for depriving us of the accustomed and inestimable privilege of trial by jury in cases affecting both life and property, to supersede the course of common law and instead thereof to publish and order the use and exercise of the law martial, and for altering fundamentally the form of government established by charter. We saw the misery to which such despotism would reduce us. Well, the founding fathers saw the misery to the despotism, but that's why they go and put fluoride in the water here to dumb the people down so they're too brainless to figure out what's going on. And this is a cite from a book called The Non-Ratification of the 14th Amendment by Judge A.H. Ella to the Utah Supreme Court in the case D.I.Y versus Turner. And he says basically the same thing, only in a little bit different way. He says, in the meantime, the civil law was the form of law imposed in the Roman Empire, which was largely, if not wholly, governed by martial law rule. Equity has always been understood to follow the law. To have superior equity is to turn things on their head. This is exactly what happens when martial law is imposed. If equity is the law, then it follows its own course rather than following the common law, thereby destroying the common law and leaving what's called equity in its place. That's why these bail priests can sit there in their so-called court and say, Constitution doesn't apply in here, and I don't want to hear another word about it. But you got to hear that, or you got to get him to say that, and he's essentially telling you that he's not a judge, that he's a bought and paid for clerk, that it's not a court, and you need to walk out of there is what you need to do, but you need to tell him why before you go. This is a letter from the Georgia Department of Driver Services. It's been sanitized to remove whoever it was sent to. And this is the part that I want to bring to your attention. It says the statute creates a rebuttable presumption of residency who meets any of the following criteria. And then in paragraph B, actually we'll go, you can read it, or we're going to continue on. This letter is signed by the General Counsel for the Georgia Department of Driver Services. And this is the text that I want to bring to your attention right here. The statute creates a rebuttable presumption of residency for anyone who meets the following criteria. However, no such person shall be considered a resident for purposes of this chapter unless such person is either a United States citizen or an alien with legal authorization from the U.S. Immigration and Naturalization Service. So again, it's all tied to their slave cestui trust. This is the Federal Tax Lien Act of 1966, located at 80 Stat 1130 and 1131, Public Law 89-719. And in the definitions section, it says a motor vehicle means a self-propelled vehicle which is registered for highway use under the laws of any state or foreign country. So that's all it needs to be, is registered. And then it goes into a security, which is talking about Federal Reserve notes and commercial paper, negotiable instruments, which is all of banksters. It's all tied into the Roman cult. This is the international law rule. This is taken from a book called the Jurisdiction, excuse me. It's taken from Jurisdiction over Federal Areas Within the States. Report of the Interdepartmental Committee for the Study of Jurisdiction over Federal Areas Within the States, Part 2, a text of the law of legislative jurisdiction submitted to the Attorney General and transmitted to the President, June 1957. And this is taken from pages 158 through 165. So this is an actual site, but not all of it's here. Where you see the dots, that's where something's left out, okay? Anyways, it's called the International Law Rule, adopted for areas under federal legislative jurisdiction. Federalizes state civil law, including common law. The rule serves to federalize not only the statutory, but the common law of the state. And federal venue discussed the civil laws effective in an area of exclusive federal jurisdiction are federal law, notwithstanding their derivation from state laws. So that's why all state laws are actually federal. All state statutes are actually federal. And a cause arising under such laws may be brought in or removed to federal district court under sections whatever of the Judicial Code. Anyways, the point being is that all state statutes are actually federal. It has to be exclusive federal jurisdiction, but if you're a U.S. citizen, and we're going to see how that works in a second, then that's how they assault you with it. It's called the Commerce Clause. And this is actually a National Mutual Insurance Company, the District of Columbia versus Tidewater Transfer Company, 1948. We therefore decline to overrule the opinion of Chief Justice Marshall. We hold that the District of Columbia is not a state within Article 3 of the Constitution. In other words, cases between citizens of the district and those of the states were not included in the catalog of controversies over which the Congress could give jurisdiction to the federal courts by virtue of Article 3. In other words, Congress has exclusive legislative jurisdiction over citizens of Washington District of Columbia, and through their plenary power, that's military dictatorship, folks, nationally covers those citizens, even when in one of the several states, as though the district expands for the purpose of regulating its citizens wherever they go throughout the states of the Union. So if you're a U.S. citizen, I don't care if you think you're in Texas, you're in the District of Columbia. And remember we talked about how contracts, okay, and how about all statutes? Well, it even gets better. Statutes equals contract equals Roman cult. A penal action is an action on a penal statute, an action for recovery of penalty given by statute. That's McNeely versus City of Natchez, Gawthorpe versus Fairmont Coal Company, where an action is founded entirely upon a statute and the only object of it is to recover a penalty or forfeiture. Such action is a penal action. Why do you think they call it the Texas Penal Code? It gets better. This is Missouri K&T Railway Company versus Dewey Portland Cement. The words penal and penalty in their strict and primary sense denote a punishment, whether corporal or pecuniary, imposed and enforced by the state for a crime or offense against its laws. The noun penalty is defined forfeiture to be forfeited for non-compliance with an agreement. The words forfeit and penalty are substantially synonymous. It's a contract. They're assaulting you with one of these so-called contracts. It all ties into the Uniform Commercial Code and these bail priests and everything else. A penal action is one founded entirely on statute and brought within the sole object of recovering a penalty or forfeiture imposed as punishment for a specific offense, while remedial action is one brought to obtain compensation or indemnity. And that's Smith Engineering Works versus Custer. A penal action is a civil suit brought for the recovery of a statutory forfeiture when inflicted as a punishment for an offense against the public. Such actions are civil actions, on the one hand closely related to criminal prosecutions, and on the other actions for private injuries in which the party agreed may by statute recover punitive damages. So, private injuries. Okay, again, that's why that bail priest, that Satanist whore that's masquerading as a judge, if you nail him down and ask him what the nature of the cause, he'll say it's quasi-criminal, because it's really not criminal. It's a civil suit. That's what these Satanists do. Advertisement. Check out my other videos. Bankster Thieves Playlist, Roman Cult Playlist, Bankrupt Corporate So-Called Governments, Bar Members 1 through 3, Do-It-Yourself How Not to Volunteer for the Selective Service in the Draft, Martial Laws Here, Do-It-Yourself No Income Tax, Do-It-Yourself Free Mail, Do-It-Yourself Kangaroo Courts 1 through 10, actually it's 10 now, Canada Border Pigs Playlist, Bar Members and their Satanic Connections Playlist. The United Nations is owned and operated by the Crown and their Roman cult handlers. Get us out of the UN now. See, the Crown is owned and operated by the Roman cult video. See, the United States is a Crown colony and the Crown owns and operates the United Nations 1 and 2 videos. Unidroit is coming from the United Nations. See the Roman cult slave scam videos. United Nations maintains the international law collection, which is also coming from the Roman cult. They're using the Roman cult's international law rule to assault us with their fraudulent, fictitious Sesticade Trust U.S. citizen slave. That's exactly what they're doing, folks. This is the Vatican's Holocaust, written by Avro Manhattan, Knight of Malta, the sensational account of the most horrifying religious massacre of the 20th century. Avro Manhattan lived between 1914 to 1990. Avro Manhattan was the world's foremost authority on Roman Catholicism and politics. A resident of London during World War II, he operated a radio station called Radio Freedom, broadcasting to occupied Europe. He was the author of over 20 books, including the bestseller The Vatican in World Politics, twice Book of the Month, and going through 57 editions. He was a Great Britain who risked his life daily to expose some of the darkest secrets of the papacy. His books were #1 on the Forbidden Index for 50 years. And then there's an editor's note, this issue from 1986. In 2006, the record is now 70 years. I guess it's now 80 years. Anyways, this is a preface to the American edition. The Vatican's Holocaust is not a misnomer, an accusation, and even less a speculation. It is an historical fact. Rabid nationalism and religious dogmatism were his two main ingredients. During the existence of Croatia as an independent Catholic state, over 700,000 men, women, and children perished. Many were executed, tortured, died of starvation, buried alive, or were burned to death. Hundreds were forced to become Catholic. Catholic padres ran concentration camps. Catholic priests were officers of the military corps which committed such atrocities. 700,000 in a total population of a few million proportionally would be as if 1/3 of the USA population had been exterminated by a Catholic militia. What we have gathered in this book will vindicate the veracity of these facts. Dates, names, places, as well as photos are there to prove them. They should become known to the American public not to foster vindictiveness, but to warn them of the danger which racialism and sectarianism, when applied with religious intolerance, can bring to any contemporary nation, whether in Europe or in the New World. This work should be assessed without prejudice and as a lesson, but even more vital, as a warning for the future of the Americans, beginning with that of the USA. And that's the preface by Avro Manhattan in 1986. And there's an editor's note. An armed Serbia could have easily prevented this Holocaust. Thank God for the Second Amendment to the Constitution, which guarantees the right to bear arms. Freedom of religion and an armed citizenry go hand in hand and is the only guarantee that this won't happen in the U.S. And another editor's note, it is the Vatican, one world government that doesn't want you to have the right to own arms or use any means to defend yourself. So you see where it's all coming from. This is all coming from the UN. The Roman cult is behind the UN, and that's why they want to disarm everybody, because they don't want you being able to defend yourself. And it's all coming from the Roman cult is where it's coming from. And George Bush Sr., when he started talking about, we have the possibility of a new world order here, well, he's bought and paid for by the Roman cult. He's going to get his judgment real soon, I'm sure. And this is a quote by this Roman Catholic Archbishop, James E. Quigley, taken from the Chicago Daily Tribune, May 5th, 1903. And within 20 years, this country is going to rule the world. Kings and emperors will soon pass away, and the democracy of the United States will take their place. When the United States rules the world, the Catholic Church will rule the world. Nothing can stand against the church. I'd like to see the politician who would try to rule against the church in Chicago. His reign would be short indeed. So, again, this is all coming from the Roman cult. And this is Jewish Encyclopedia, 1901 to 1906, Volume 2, page 497. Meanwhile, the nationalistic and reactionary parties in France desired to counterbalance the Semitic influence of the Rothschilds by establishing a banking concern which should be essentially Catholic. It is a somewhat curious sequel to the attempt to set up a Catholic competitor to the Rothschilds that at the present time the latter are the guardians of the papal treasure. So think about what they're saying here. First of all, they're saying that the Rothschilds are Semitic, which means Jewish, and that's true. And these nationalistic and reactionary parties in France tried to set up a banking concern that wouldn't be Jewish. Okay, they wanted it to be Catholic. And then they're saying it's somewhat curious that the Catholic competitor, that they were going to set up a Catholic competitor to the Rothschilds, and the Rothschilds are the guardians of the papal treasure. So the Jews and the Catholics, I wouldn't say, and I just want to say that I have many wonderful friends who happen to be Jewish, and so most Jews don't want this kind of stuff to be going on any more than the rest of us. So we shouldn't be picking on Jews in particular. But the point is that the Rothschilds is tied in with the Roman cult. And why do you think they want to set up a Federal Reserve Bank? That's exactly why. Because it all ties in with the Roman cult. This is all coming from the Roman cult. Roman cult equals slavery. Roman cult equals warfare. The Roman cult is responsible for all slavery. See the international law video. All bar members, judges, lawyers are agents of the Roman cult. See the bar members 1, 2, and 3 videos. See the judicial horrors videos. See the boy judgments video. Governments descend to the level of a mere private corporation and take on the characteristics of a mere private citizen, where private corporate commercial paper, Federal Reserve notes, and securities, checks, are concerned. For purposes of suits, such corporations and individuals are regarded as entities entirely separate from government. And that's Clearfield Trust Company versus United States, 1943. And so that's why they want to force the government into this negotiable instruments, commercial paper, because they lose their sovereignty. They become slaves. Two national governments exist, one to be maintained under the Constitution with all its restrictions, the other to be maintained by Congress outside and independently of that instrument. And that's the dissenting opinion of Justice Marshall Harlan in the case Downs versus Bidwell, 182 U.S. 244 in 1901. And that's exactly what's going on. Two national governments exist. Do you want to be in the corporation or do you want to be in the de jure one? You can be in one or the other. You cannot be in both. This is Chisholm versus Georgia, 1794. A state does not owe its origin to the government of the United States in the highest or any of its branches. It was in existence before. It derives its authority from the same pure and sacred source as itself, the voluntary and deliberate choice of the people. A state is altogether exempt from the jurisdiction of the courts of the United States or from any other exterior authority, unless in special instances where the general government has power derived from the Constitution itself. The question to be determined is whether the state so respectable and whose claims soar so high is amenable to the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court of the United States. This question, important in itself, will depend on others, more important still, and may perhaps be ultimately resolved into one no less radical than this. Do the people of the United States form a nation? By that law, the several states and governments spread over our globe are considered as forming a society, not a nation. And what they're saying essentially is that all of the governments in the world at the time of this case were not de jure lawful governments. They were corporations. And the United States was a de jure government, but now, according to Downs versus Bidwell, that de jure government is still here. But now there's a corporation there too. And most people are tied up with this corporation because they are completely clueless about what's going on. Everything they do is a fraud. A U.S. citizen is a fraud. Commercial paper, Federal Reserve notes are a fraud. All mortgages are a fraud. They get you to participate and they're a fraud. Then they assault you with one of their so-called contracts, and then they sell you into slavery. That's exactly their modus operandi, okay, their MO. Everybody in prison was sold into slavery. Roman cult equals slavery. If you go in there and the judge says the Constitution or common law does not apply in here, I do not want to hear another word about it, he is essentially saying that you are not in a court and he is not in his official capacity. I mean, if he doesn't say it, get him to say it. Once he says it, your response should be, well, this is not a court, and you're not a judge, and you're all a gang of thieves, and I think I'm going to leave. An alternative that you could say, are you telling me, Mr. Judge, that this is not a court? Are you telling me that you're not operating in your official capacity? Are you telling me that you intend to be personally liable in this matter? About that time, they're probably going to throw you out of there is what they'll do. The bottom line, if you stay in there, they will sell you into slavery. That's why you have to walk out and you file notice of void judgment, revocation of signatures, and criminal complaints is what I would do. Get a copy of the record if there is one. Usually they conveniently don't have one, or they'll get the court to doctor it up for them. You know, they're nothing but a bunch of thieves, okay? Don't get me going. Anyways, their best bet is to get out of there. And I would get up in their face, and I'll tell you right now, the more you get up in the face, the more they respect it, and just tell them the way it is, and you watch them dive for cover. Anyways, that's the end of this one. I don't even go in there, quite frankly. These people are just nothing but thieves, and pirates, and I just make it known in no uncertain terms that that's what they are, and that's it. That's what I do. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.